Καλησπέρα σας, καλοί φίλοι τηλεθεατές. Good evening to you. Welcome to our program. I'm very happy to have with me today, tonight, Joan Ryan, very well known to our Greek community. Welcome to our program.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening to you. So, an MP for Enfield North, you were until a few days ago.
That's
yes?
right. Yes, that's right.
And you stand for the elections. Elections are coming very soon here. So, I'm going to ask you, first of all, another elections, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Just 2 years ago, it was elections. Now another one is coming very soon. What will be the main issues that you will be the focus of your campaign?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right. Just 2 years ago, we fought the last election, and this is I think the first snap election since 1974.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had a very, very busy week, 10 days, putting everything in place and preparing, doing everything that we'd normally spend 3, 4, 5 months
Yes.
working through. In Enfield North, the issues on the doorstep are very clear, and the needs of the whole community are very clear. And they centre around the issues of healthcare provision, hospitals and GPs. Education, there's a lot of concern about the cuts to the school budgets and the difficulty that is causing the larger class sizes, the loss of teachers. Policing, we have a very difficult situation. We've had a number of stabbings and shootings in recent weeks. So we've got a very big rise in violent crime and a fall in the number of police, a very big fall. Over the last 7 years, we've lost 188 uniformed officers off the streets of Enfield. Housing is a major issue. There is a shortage of supply, and prices are very, very high in Enfield when it used to be a reasonably priced borough. And the private rented sector is also very expensive, and some of the private let is very substandard. So there is another issue there. So health, education, crime, housing really are the top domestic issues.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose coming up just behind them is transport and air quality, air pollution. So that's the domestic scene in Enfield. But one very big issue is also Brexit,
Mm-hmm.
and people's concern about what the outcome of the Brexit negotiations will be, what it will mean for them, for their families, for their jobs, for our economy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, staying on that subject, Brexit, okay? As you can understand, I am particularly concerned about the fate of Cypriots, Greek Cypriots and Greeks from Greece, you know what I mean? And, are you going to make sure that you're going to support the guarantee of their right to stay, and you're going to guarantee the right of stay in, what are you going to do?
For EU nationals,
Taking further, Mr. Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn, has said he will do the minute he will come to power, independent of the progress in the negotiations. What have you said to that?
I think that EU nationals, which would include Cypriots, who are already here, who are making their life here, who are working here, who are settled here, I think we should very much give them the reassurance they need and deserve that yes, of course, they can stay. and we want the same reassurance for British citizens in European Union countries.
Yes.
And I think it would be a very good idea to do that, first of all, for the individuals involved who are here and making a contribution to this society, and for the British citizens who are doing the same in other European countries. But secondly, I think it would be a very good idea to show a little bit of goodwill to the European Union. I am very concerned that Theresa May seems to approach the situation, along with David Davis and Boris Johnson, in a very clumsy and high-handed fashion, and seems to forget that we are leaving the EU, not the EU leaving us. And we cannot just demand the terms on which we will leave. And so I think it would be helpful to be a little bit more user-friendly with the EU about the negotiations. And the situation for EU nationals, I think, would be a very good way of showing some goodwill and friendship, because after all, even after we've left, these are our closest neighbours, our closest trading allies, and they are an integral part of the security situation for this country. So it would be very foolish not to establish good relationships outside the EU as we've had inside the EU. Mm-hmm. But for my own part, let me say, I think we have to respect the vote that the British people have taken. I voted Remain. My constituency of Enfield North is almost a dead heat. It's even closer than the national result. So it's very much split right down the middle between a kind of 49 and 51%. Very, very close. Mm-hmm. So I voted Remain, but we said this was a national referendum. We didn't say it was a constituency-based one. We didn't say it was borough-based or region. We said the national result would determine the outcome. I think we have to keep faith with that. I think that's what is required in a democracy. You can't contradict the voter. However close it was, we have to now accept that decision. I accept the decision. I voted for Article 50, and I think we have to get on with it. Mm-hmm. But I think we have to get on with it and try and work cooperatively in Parliament and with government, whoever is in number 10. And we have to make sure that we come away with the very best deal for the British people. Mm-hmm. And for me, the best deal for the people of Enfield. And I don't think we achieve that by just giving Theresa May a blank cheque to go and negotiate any deal that she pleases. I think we live in a parliamentary democracy, and it's right that Parliament should have some oversight of this decision. That why would we take the pressure off? We need to keep some pressure on Theresa May to go and negotiate the best, most positive deal for jobs, for our economy, for our security and our defence, for the people of this country. And therefore, she needs to come back to Parliament, and Parliament needs to have a proper say in whether that deal is a good deal or not. Just like she wanted to get Article 50 triggered just on the back of her own decision. And it was the courts who said to her, no, you have to bring that to Parliament. You have to have a bill, a white paper, and a proper debate. We went into the EU on legislation with a bill, and we go out the same way with legislation. We all have a mandate from the people who elect us, and it's right that Parliament speaks on behalf of the people. So whatever deal Theresa May manages to get, and we should work as cooperatively as we can with her, but she has to know there is this pressure, this accountability and this scrutiny that she must bring it back to Parliament so we can ensure that the British people get the best deal and that the EU nationals here and the British nationals abroad also get a fair and good deal.
You're supporting that idea, and you're gonna insist on that, yes?
I am, yes.
And you promise you're gonna do your best.
Yes, absolutely,
for those,
I am.
Who are
absolutely.
Listening to us at the moment from Enfield.
Yes, absolutely, I am.
Staying on the subject of what needs they have, in Enfield, and you're talking about houses are expensive, rent is expensive. What can you do about it? I mean, to reduce even the cost of rent, because it's so difficult for people to cope with that.
I think it's a question of supply and demand.
So if you supply more houses,
yeah, I think, look, the government, I think, acknowledges they should be building more, that needs to happen, but they've been saying that now for
ages,
for 7 long years.
Yes.
And there's been very little progress. We've got some of the lowest levels of house building that we've seen since the 1920s. So, and certainly since the post-war period. So if you built more and the supply was stronger, then that would naturally bring prices down to a more affordable level. They also need to build more of what we call affordable homes, more housing association homes, more homes for shared ownership, and more homes that are pitched at an affordable rent for people.
Okay, talking about building more houses and, so you can find a way to reduce the rent and all this, where is the money going to come from? I mean, even, it's another subject. Mr. Corbyn says that he's going to employ 10,000 police. So where is this money going to come from?
Well, any government makes choices and has their priorities. I mean, it's not as if the current government spends no money. It's,
no, they do.
As you know, yes. So it's where you direct those resources to, and what you think is the best way to spend money to benefit the majority of the population and address the needs that they have. And it's also what you think is your best fiscal policies. We've heard a lot about changes to taxation in this country that have only benefited a few people rather than the majority. So I think undoubtedly we're going to have to be very careful about finances, there's no question. However, the current government has been very slowly changing the things it says, so that it's adopting many of the ideas that were originally put forward, for instance, by Ed Balls and Ed Miliband, when in the last election, just 2 years ago, they constantly said, there's no money for that, this can't be done, and now they seem to think that it can be done. Yes. So I think most people realise, and many economists say, that the austerity that we have is not helping the economy to recover. And the people paying the price for that are the many, not the few. So we've seen hardly any uplift in wages. People have been fortunate if they've had a 1% pay increase, whereas inflation and prices have outstripped that, and certainly rental costs have. So we've got a situation in Enfield where a lot of people are paying over 50% of their income in their rent. It's unsustainable, and what it means is people who are working are living in poverty. These are not people who are lazy or don't want to go out to work, but we are creating an ever larger group of the working poor. So much so, we heard the other day of nurses and midwives using food banks. And Theresa May's answer, when asked this question, whether this was acceptable, whether nurses and midwives should be being paid so little that they have to use food banks, and her answer was, there are complex reasons why people use a food bank. I don't think it's complex. People who use a food bank do so because they can't afford to go to the shops and buy their food. And we've got food banks in Enfield now that are doing clothing packages for under fives. So I think that's a measure of how hard life is for a lot of people. People who are in work, not only are they getting food from food banks, they're having to get clothing to feed their little ones. I think we should be ashamed in one of the world's largest economies. There's a debate, are we fifth, are we seventh? But wherever we are a very large economy. That if you just look at us on all the various world economic measures, we are one of the richest countries in the world.
Yes.
And yet we have people who are working, as well as those who are not, having to use food banks for both clothes and food. People like nurses and midwives who are making a most important contribution to our community, a contribution that we can't do without. I think we should be ashamed that we're not paying such people a proper income. And that's down to the kind of choices a government makes. And I think a Labour government would make very different choices. And every time Labour comes to power, it always has to rescue the National Health Service, for instance. And I think that tells you something about the values and principles of Labour.
Okay. Talking about lives of people, and what else can you do to improve the lives of the citizens of your area, for example?
I think education is crucially important. We all want our children and our grandchildren to be able to access the very best education and opportunities. And I think we all know that that is the way to get on in life. My parents were immigrants from Ireland, and they came here when my mum was a child, but my father was an adult. And I was the first generation in my family to go to university, and my three sisters, because my parents set great store by getting a good education. And they were right, because life for my mum and dad was hard. They didn't have professional jobs, and they had to work very hard all their lives. And my mum was a widow, and not a very well-off widow. She always used to say Tony Blair made her pension worth something. She really liked Tony Blair. She said he looked after the pensioners. She's not with us, sadly, anymore. She passed away a couple of years ago. But, you know, life was hard for them, but they wanted to make life better for their children. And I think that's what we all aspire to make life better for your children than it's been for yourself, to help them get better qualified, better jobs, to get on in life. And that's what my parents did. I think that's very hard for people today. I know in my constituency, lots of people tell me their adult children are still living at home. They can't afford to branch out and buy somewhere for themselves. Lots of them tell me that when they do get married and have children, they're having to move a long way outside of London. And so it's hard for the family to be really supportive and engaged, which is not good, because it breaks down the relationship. And community, the building block of community is the family. I want to live near my grandchildren. I'm very lucky. We've got 4 grandchildren and we want to be able to help out. We want to spend time with them. We want to support our children in bringing up their children. And one of the things we most want is that they can do well at school. And now I've been meeting with the primary head teachers and the secondary head teachers. And it's very unusual, I think, for teachers to be out there, head teachers campaigning against a government. But that is what they're doing. They are talking to members of parliament and they are saying the government has got this wrong. They are taking huge sums of money out of schools. They've given a 1% pay rise to teachers, but they haven't given the schools the money to fund it. I consider that dishonest and morally wrong. You tell the teachers to get a pay rise, but you don't put it into the school budget. There's been an increase in national insurance. They've not put that into the school budget. Schools are going to suffer from the apprenticeship levy. Though we want apprenticeships, we don't expect the money to come out of the school budget. So all told, we've got many schools who are saying they're having to let teachers go. They're having to let teaching assistants go in primary schools, and we know what a significant difference these individuals make in the classroom. The most significant resource in any classroom is the teacher, and in the primary schools, the teacher with the teaching assistant. And we're also seeing primary school classes climbing up well above 30 again, up to 36, 38. So that what happens is the teacher becomes a childminder because it's impossible to teach very large groups like that. So I think education is a priority. We can make life better for people in Enfield by properly funding our schools, something the Conservative government promised to do and is not doing. So I think that's very, very important for the future.
So, yes, you explained to me earlier on the money has to go where it's important. So you're going to spend more money on education.
I think we need to properly fund and keep our promises on schools. Very definitely so.
Very good. So, staying, in the interest of people, recently something happened in Green Lanes. They create a bicycle line, in the Green Lanes.
A cycle lane.
Yes.
Boris Johnson's cycle lane,
So what's happened? I mean, the businesses are suffering. What you can do to change the situation? I mean, is it possible to, cancel this? Or
there's
whatever?
dispute, isn't there, about the evidence on this?
I mean, I know quite a few people, Cypriots and Greeks, and other people I talk to, and they're
You've not been happy about it.
They're not very happy, and they're complaining, and they lose businesses and all this.
Yeah, I don't know what the evidence is, and I think it's important that we see that, and we need to look after businesses because small businesses and retail areas, they're the backbone of our local economies. So their views are very important. Boris Johnson offered all this money, I think it's about 35 million, for what he called Mini Holland, for 3 boroughs. And lots of boroughs bid for it. And on Enfield Council, there was unanimity. The Labour and the Conservative councillors supported the bid. So it's important to recognise that was the case. So the bid went forward. Now I think, given what we know now about how poisonous NOx in diesel is and how bad our air quality, I think over the next 10, 15 years, all boroughs are going to have to develop their cycleways to a much greater extent than at present. So I suppose the advantage for Enfield is that the money for this has not come out of the council taxpayers' pocket. It came centrally from the Mayor for London. But it is true that some businesses have said this is not helpful, this is affecting our profits. So the council committed to very full consultation, and the council say that the consultation in that area, for instance, that the majority of people were in favour. The cycle lane is also proposed to go right up the Hertford Road in Eastern Enfield, in my constituency. So I'm proposing, as I've had representations from some businesses, not in Green Lanes but on the Hertford Road,
Yes.
who say they are very worried, they are concerned this will affect their businesses. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to do my own survey of businesses on the Hertford Road, and I'm also going to have further meetings with the council. I've already had a number of meetings. I'm going to have further meetings and see what the evidence is around this issue, because I don't want business to suffer. I think we all, in principle, agree that cycle lanes and cycling are a good thing. They're healthy, they reduce air pollution for everybody, so they're healthy even for the people who are not cyclists. And I think there is evidence of a huge growth in cycling, certainly in London and in the rest of the country. So we've got to accommodate that, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't damage business. So it's not happened yet up the Hertford Road. I'm not sure what the timetable is, because I think there might have been some movement in that, but I'm not certain. But I am going to find out, because I've just recently, a couple of days ago in fact, had businesses approach me and say they're concerned. So I'm going to do my own investigation and get to the bottom of what the problem is. If people agree in principle, what is the problem in practice in terms of implementation and the consequences or impact on business? And let's see if we can't find a way forward that everybody can be happy with.
Okay, can we go to another area now, political matters? And shall I ask you about the situation in Turkey, after the referendum?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? I mean, is it going to be good for the rest of us and Europe? What are your thoughts, and what had you said to that?
Well,
You supporting?
I don't know if it will be good, but I had a debate in Parliament a few weeks before that referendum, and I applied for the debate and was granted it, and I led the debate. And I think I made it very clear there that we should have very great concerns about the situation in Turkey, and that I wasn't happy that the government were doing enough to express those concerns. And the concerns centre around a number of things. First of all, the undermining, I believe, of parliamentary democracy in Turkey. So my view was that it would be better to vote no in that referendum. It's not a matter, I don't have a vote, but if asked my view was that it wasn't a good thing. And I also felt that if you look at the overall situation, the number of people who've been arrested, 40,000 and more. The number of people detained, 10,000 and more. Journalists arrested, newspapers and media outlets closed down, judges arrested, the President Erdogan refusing to to accept the rulings of courts. Members of Parliament arrested, their immunity removed. I think if you look at all those things, and also the loss of life, of innocent life, on the streets of Turkey, all of that leads me to believe that something very worrying is happening in Turkey. And all of that led me to conclude that it is not safe to undermine parliamentary democracy and give President Erdogan the amount of power that this referendum gives him. I think we should be very concerned about what's happening there. I've got a very large Kurdish and Alevi community in the constituency of Turkish origin. And many of them have told me that their family and friends are frightened, that some of them are frightened of going to visit family and friends, and I've had people detained. Subsequently released, but detained. So I'm very concerned what's happening in Turkey. I am not sure that it offers us any sense of security whatsoever. And I think Theresa May, I think it was a little unseemly to rush there straight from America, where she'd been meeting with President Trump. And really, the only thing she seemed to be bothered about talking to Turkey about was trade and selling arms to Erdogan. Now, you can't ignore human rights, and there is a human rights issue in Turkey. There's long been a human rights issue in Cyprus in relation to Turkey.
Definitely.
There is a human rights issue, and you can't, you have to have both human rights and recognition and respect for human rights and trade. It's not one or the other. And in the case of Theresa May, I felt that trade was figuring far more importantly than human rights.
Yes, human rights are more important, I think. Yes.
I think so. And you can have both, but you've got to be, she needs to be more of a critical friend to Turkey, as does Alan Duncan, the minister. They've both been there, and Boris Johnson. And I don't hear the kind of concerns that I would expect to hear about the situation in Turkey. But I have heard it from some other European Union countries.
Okay. Staying on that subject, because it's connected, what are your thoughts about the latest round of negotiations in Cyprus between President Anastasiadis and Mr. Akiji, and what will Labour Party do if they be elected and finally, help to reunite the island?
And of course, it's very important because this country is a guarantor power, and the Labour Party is always, I think as long as I've been involved, prided itself on being a friend of Cyprus. And as you know, I was special representative to Cyprus for Gordon Brown's government. I understand the talks have resumed today, the 2nd of May. I don't know know any news of what has been said today. But I know that Asman Barthed, the UN envoy, feels there is reason to still be positive about these talks. I think both President Anastasiadis and Mr. Akinger have overall both shown a real commitment to taking this forward. So I think we need to give very positive support to these talks, and I think the Labour Party will stand ready to give whatever support it can. But at the end of the day, the situation in Cyprus must be decided by Cypriots for Cypriots, and we always have to be very clear about that. It's not for us to impose some kind of solution. on anybody, and it won't work unless both sides are signed up to it. But we've come a long way, and there's been a lot of discussion about some of the most difficult and very important issues. And I do believe that in the end this situation can be resolved. And there's only one real way of resolving this, and that is one Cyprus, one sovereign, single sovereign Cyprus, a single legal international identity, a bizonal, bicommunal federation, and that's Labour policy. And that's the position I've always adopted. And I think we have to do everything we can at whatever level we can to support that. When I was Special Representative, we were working hard to do all we could to encourage the building of grassroots connections and networks so that we can see a constituency for peace, because peace is a top-down and bottom-up process. And I think we learnt that very much in Northern Ireland. And so I feel positive that a way forward can be found. But I'm not naive. It's difficult. It's very difficult. If it was easy, we'd already be there, because I believe the vast majority of Cypriots want that solution and want that one single Cyprus. And I think it was interesting when, I think it was the Turkish foreign minister recently made some remark about Cyprus being a kind of province of Turkey, and both the Greek Cypriot community and the Turkish Cypriot community, the foreign minister, I think, of the Republic of Cyprus, and the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community made it very, very clear that those kind of remarks don't help any Cypriots, and that isn't the case, that they're not a province of anywhere, they are Cyprus. So I'm positive, but I acknowledge it's difficult.
Yeah. It came to my mind, you know, there is somewhere in London a place where they call it the so-called, you know, Cypriot-Turkish government. It's an embassy. Do you have anything? Do you hear about that?
I've not been there. But you mean the TRNC?
Something like that. I don't know. It's a so-called, you know, and then. I mean, if
I have heard of it, obviously, and
you heard of it. Yeah. Would you, I mean, ask your government if you be elected, you know, to close it down?
Well, it's not an embassy because we don't recognise the. You know, we only recognise the Republic of Cyprus and that government and their embassy. So I think we need to be careful because we don't want to imply recognition. Strangely, closing something down as if it was an embassy implies that it might be. It's not an embassy. And it's not recognised as an embassy by this country.
It's an organisation? What is it exactly?
Well,
they call it an embassy.
I don't know. You'd have to ask them. But it's.
Would you ask your government to close it down if it, you know, they call it an embassy? You know.
I wouldn't want to do anything that changed the current status of recognition until we get a settlement that recognises, you know, the bizonal, bicommunal federation that I've talked about. I also think we need to look forward and bring people together. I think that's very important. So there is this building you talk about, and there is a Turkish Cypriot representative. They're not an ambassador. They're not an ambassador. And MPs do meet with, I think it's a woman, do meet with her. And I have met with her. I'm not, you know, when she's asked to meet with me. But she's meeting in the way we don't call, Mr. Ackinger, who I respect, but we don't call him a president. We call him the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community. And I think it's important that we don't do anything that it creates ill feeling when we're trying to help the two communities and the leaders of the two communities to find a way forward in a very difficult situation.
You're talking about the president of
President of Cyprus and the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community. And the British position is very clear about which government it recognises, and the situation with Northern Cyprus, which is not recognised.
Okay. Now, just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you at the beginning, about your family or this kind of thing, but do you have free time, and what do you do with your free time? I mean, do you have hobbies on this?
I go to the gym.
Gym is good.
I like running.
Okay.
So I do a little bit of that when I've got time.
Do you have a big family?
My own personal
Your own
family.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got. I've got 2 children. They're grown up, and 2 stepchildren who are also grown up, and we've got 4 grandchildren. Martin and I. Martin's my husband. He works for the Trade Union Congress.
Is he in politics?
He works for the TUC.
Okay.
He's a trade unionist. He's an education officer.
Oh, lovely. All right. Do you support arts? And
Do I support
arts? Like
the arts?
Yeah, the arts.
Yeah.
And what do you do? I mean, what is your advice for people who are involved in arts to succeed, and how they can get help and do what they love?
Well, I think it's very difficult at the moment, is my understanding, for the arts, because funding is a very difficult issue. But there are funds available, and I think cultural identity is extremely important. It's part of who you are, and I think when people are engaged with the culture of both their heritage and their background and where they live, I think that's very important. So for me, growing up, I'm very proud of my Irish heritage, but I'm also very proud to be British. And when I was a child, we learnt Irish dancing and learnt about Irish culture, and I think that's important because it's very important for children to understand where they come from and their background and the culture of their parents and the culture they inherit. But equally, I think for this generation, the second and third generations, they want to be British as well. So, and I think that's really important. My grandchildren all support England football team, and so do I. It's wonderful when we all sit down together to watch the football. But my father wouldn't have been an England football fan because he came here as an adult and he was an Irishman. And although football's wasn't then the biggest sport in Ireland, he was a big rugby union fan.
Yeah. And
hurley. I think things move on. It can be hard, can't it, when your parents have been an immigrant family.
Exactly.
I appreciate how difficult that is for the children. It was at times for us. You can feel pulled 2 different ways. I think what's important is to put that together. That's why I think things like arts and culture and exposing children to arts and culture is very important. So I don't think it's more important than things like social care. We have a big crisis in proper care for the elderly, the vulnerable, the sick and those with mental health problems. So those kind of things must come first.
Yes.
But if we manage the economy properly,
Yes, then
you
we
should
can
be able to fund
spend more for us as well.
That's exactly. And
Okay.
that's the fear about Brexit, isn't it? That,
Exactly.
that, you know, if it's not managed properly to the benefit of everybody, so we get the best deal for Britain, we could suffer terribly.
This is the important thing. So, in few words, sorry, why do people have to vote for you?
Why do people have to vote for me?
Yes.
I stand on my record. I am a fighter. Nothing will ever make me give up fighting for the people of Enfield North and the things they need, and for the communities within my community. And I know that we need a good hospital, we need good doctors, we need more police, we need good education. And I will be the voice of those people. And I never give up. I am on their side. I am a fighter. And I think today that's what you need to be. And I don't care who is in number 10. I'm going to stand up for the people of Enfield. That's my absolute first priority, to put the people I represent first and their needs first.
Lovely. This is what we want to hear. Thank you very much. Thank you for
you.
being with us tonight.
It's been my pleasure.
And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight. Thank you very much for staying with us. And me and you are going to be together very soon again. Have a good night.